Hi, my name is Becky Robinson, and I'm here with my good friend and client, Bill Treasurer. Welcome, Bill.
Hey, Becky, it's good to be here.
It's good to be here with you, too. I think we were chatting before everyone got on the line, and I think we discovered that this is our sixth webinar together. So
Six.
it's an extreme pleasure to welcome you again. For those of you who are just joining us, I want to let you know about a few things as we begin today's impromptu event. First of all, we will have time for Q&A with Bill at the end on this very important topic. And so I invite you to use that question panel throughout the event to add your questions, and I'll do my best to get to as many of those questions as I can. And so if you haven't already, please take a moment to get familiar with the GoToWebinar panel. And I see that there are already a couple of you saying hello to me. So hi back. I'm so glad to have you from Minneapolis and Florida. And others of you who are on the line that you want to let me know where you're calling in from, I'd love to hear that. If you haven't participated in one of our webinars before, you might not know that we record every single event, and we'll get that recording to you after in case you'd like to share it with your colleagues or friends. The other thing you might want to know is that we always provide a PDF of the slides so that you can have those notes after the fact and refresh your learning. What you might not know is that today's event is a little bit unique in that Bill's new book, Becoming. Wait, how did I forget the title of your book? Oh my goodness. So I'm getting confused between the title of the book and the title of the webinar. But at any rate, Bill's new book is coming in January of 2017. So it's very unusual for us to get the extreme pleasure of being exposed to the content so far in advance. And because of that, we don't have any print books to give away today, but we do have something else that's extra special. And so I want to encourage you to stay on the event until the very end so you can hear about what we have for you today, which is different than a print book since the book is not coming until January of 2017. Bill, did you know that it's exactly 130 days until your new book launches?
No, but I'm glad that you told me that. I can't wait for a leadership kick in the ass. Comes out February 16th.
I'm going to let you say the PG words, Bill. There you go. There you go. I just had a block. All right. So I think that I've covered all the important things except for formally introducing today's guest. So as I mentioned before, Bill is my friend and a longtime client of Weaving Influence. He's also the Chief Encouragement Officer of Giant Leap Consulting. And he's the author of several past best-selling books, including Courage Goes to Work and Leaders Open Doors. And something interesting about Leaders Open Doors is that all the proceeds from that book do go to help different nonprofits that serve people with special needs. And that's especially unique. It's the first book I've ever worked on of that type. And a lot of that comes from Bill's heart for people with special needs. He has a daughter, Bina, who has special needs. And it's been really exciting to see the way the sales of that book, Leaders Open Doors, have generated so much generosity on Bill's part. And even getting to see that firsthand has been tremendous. Bill works and designs leadership and succession programs for all sorts of amazing clients, and you've probably heard of them. They include NASA and Saks Fifth Avenue, UBS Bank, Walsh Construction, Spanx, and the Pittsburgh Pirates. So if you happen to be on this call really early, you would have seen that Bill had his Pirates shirt on, and that's a lot to do with the fact that they're a client of his. So I hope I covered everything. In addition to Bina, Bill has two sons and an amazing wife, and it's been fun to share the journey with you, Bill.
Oh, it's terrific. I'm so glad to be here and so thankful for all of the work that you put into today as well.
Indeed. So in terms of a hashtag for today, I think that our chat window is still referencing the last hashtag for the event that was canceled, and we have you as this pinch hitter guest today. I'm going to recommend, if you'd like to live tweet today's event, that you use the hashtag. Oh, I'm hearing that it is updated and someone chose a hashtag, and I'm not sure what it is because I can't see it. So Steph, if you can help me by telling me what the new hashtag for this event is, I would love it. It's called Leadership Kick. So if you'd like to join us in sharing your insights from this event, I would invite you to use that hashtag Leadership Kick. And I can even say that, Leadership Kick. So kudos to whoever picked that hashtag. And Bill, I'm going to go off camera and I look forward to rejoining you for the Q&A.
Okay, terrific. Well, thanks so much for that gracious introduction, Becky. And it's interesting that you mentioned proceeds from Leaders Open Doors going to programs that support kids with special needs, because I just got a new royalty check yesterday from ATD, the publisher of the book, and it's for $3,900. So some worthy special need organization is going to be getting $3,900 based on how well that book did. So I'm really, it's very gratifying to be able to have that book do what it was supposed to do, which is give back to others, which a lot of leadership is about that too. Grateful to be here. I have to tell you, for those folks that have joined the webinar, I only found out Friday about this opportunity, and that meant that a lot of people had to work over the weekend to pull it all together, including the Weaving Influence staff. So I'm very appreciative of all the work that they've done, scurrying behind the scenes to pull this thing off. And then people that work with me as well that have done a great job of pulling together the material. The challenge has been that this new book is launching. It's called The Leadership Kick in the Ass, and it comes out on January 16th. And the challenge for me was to distill all of the information in that book into basically a 45-minute webinar so we can give you all time for Q&A as well. And I feel like we've done a pretty good job. So I hope that you agree as we get into it. My company is Giant Leap Consulting, and I've had it for 15 years now. We're into the 15th year, and I've been really fortunate to have worked with many of the folks that are probably attending today's webinar, and some really cool companies. And in the last 15 years, 12 of those years, I've been going up to Chicago pretty much monthly. And I have 3 major clients up in Chicago, and all of them are in the construction field. And frankly, they're in the unionized construction field. So it's nitty gritty, no BS kind of workforces. And they have very low tolerance for organizational development frou-frou. And that's had an impact on me in the last 12 years since I've been working with those companies. Because I come from a discipline of organizational development, and I came out of graduate school, and then with my experience working for the big management consulting company, and then it sort of influenced how I was. And I think that a lot of folks like myself can lean a little bit towards idealism when it comes to leadership. But working with these nitty-gritty construction companies taught me that you got to have things that are practical, useful, and work. Otherwise, get out of the way. And I think that the tone of this book is different than my other books. And the lessons really are drawn from that Chicago-based experience working with union construction companies. I hope that you enjoy today's the time that we get to share together, and I certainly look forward to your questions as we go through. I live in Asheville, North Carolina. It's a great place, great state, and I live about 45 minutes from the Cherokee Reservation, where the eastern band of the Cherokee reside, and it's the largest population of the Cherokee Nation on the East Coast. And there's a Cherokee legend that I think really sort of sums up well the ideas that I'm going to be talking about today, and many of the ideas covered in A Leadership Kick in the Ass. And so I'd like to first share this story. This comes from the Cherokee Nation, and it's an old Cherokee teaching, and here's how it goes. An old Cherokee is teaching his grandson about life. A fight is going on inside of me, the elder said to a boy. It's a terrible fight, and it's between 2 wolves. One is evil. He's anger and envy, sorrow, regret, greed, arrogance, self-pity, guilt, resentment, inferiority, lies, false pride, superiority, and ego. He continued, the other wolf is good. He's joy, peace, love, hope, serenity, humility, kindness, benevolence, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion, and faith. The same fight is going on inside of you and inside of every other person too. And the grandson thought for a minute, and then he asked his grandfather, which wolf will win, Grandpa? And the elder said, the one you feed. And that's really much of what we're going to be talking today. Leadership, when it comes down to it, is a choice. And the choice becomes, how will you lead? To me, it's a powerful story. I think it gets to the dualistic nature of human beings, that we can be decent, noble, compassionate, and selfless one minute, and petty, ignoble, uncaring, and arrogant the next. Likewise, every leader has the capacity to be selfless, caring, and out for the best of others, or selfish, uncaring, and out for themselves. The choice becomes, which kind of leader do you want to be, and which leader will you feed? And so that's the starting point of today. Here's what I want to talk about in the time that we've got together, what the webinar is going to cover. First is some context about the idea of leadership. Next, we're going to talk about the importance of respect. And respect has a lot to do with who you are and how you treat others. And then we're going to talk about 2 disrespectful leaders that we all have the potential of becoming if we're not careful. I'm going to then share with you common kicks that happen as a result of being a disrespectful leader, but why those kicks ultimately are good if you learn from them, and how they can have a transformational impact on the way that you lead. So we're going to talk then about what we call the holy shift, and that is from being one way as a leader, having a humiliating experience, and then acting a different way on the other side of it. And finally, I'll share with you some tips along the way and afterwards about how you can be a leader who's more self-respectful and respectful of others. Now, to get us started in terms of context for leadership, here's what I think is the first law of leadership. It's not about you. When you're a leader, it's not about you. It's about the people and the organization that you serve. And I think that it's easy to lose sight of that. First of all, we take this idea of leadership and we really inflate it. And we make leaders feel special. We give them bigger office space. We give them a nice parking spot. We give them more money and opportunities for bonus. And we start letting them feel that they're special because they're leaders. And then they start to think that they're the point of it, and they're not. Leadership, and the point of leadership, is for creating opportunities for the people and the organization that you serve, and you have a job, and that is to leave people and the organization better off than you found it. I work with a lot of emerging and experienced leaders, but in my work with emerging leaders in particular, they may start from a management position, and they're conscious about themselves excelling. They want to get to the next rung. They want to put their leader out of a job so they can have their job. They want all the perks that come with leadership. They're very, very ambitious with sharp elbows. I was that way in my young 30s. I get it. It's very normal to be that way. But I think what happens is that when we start losing sight that the point of leadership is not you, we start veering towards leadership behavior that sometimes mistreats others because we become self-focused instead of focusing on others. The fact is that you succeed as a leader to the extent that you help other people become successful. Leadership is about showing up the best of yourself, that is behaving out of your best self, so that you draw out the best performance and the best self of others. Leadership's not about getting more followers. It's about creating more leaders. So one thing that's useful to talk about is the idea of respect. R-E-S-P-E-C-T. Aretha had it right. A lot comes down to respect. Now, I told you that I've been working a lot with Chicago-based companies, and they all sort of talk about respect almost in mafioso terms, like, I respect that person. I respect. They have a lot of my respect. Their work ethic gives me a lot of respect. They are disrespectful, or they don't respect me, or they do respect me. They talk about respect. Respect really does matter when it comes to leadership. So let's explore just for a little while this idea of respect and what does it mean relative to yourself and in how you carry yourself with others. So I think that there's this ego balance, and I think all of us have to pay attention to it, but leaders in particular have to be mindful of this ego balance. On the worst side of the dimension is self-absorption, when it's all about you, when your focus is self-focused, when your preoccupation is what you're going to get, when you want to make sure your needs are met before other people's needs are. And this veers towards arrogance. And we don't like it when we see it in a leader. And then on the other end, the other poor end, if you will, is self-neglect. And these are leaders who don't pay attention to their own needs, who don't take care of themselves physically, mentally, spiritually, and they put themselves last. Both of these conditions of respect as it relates to themselves are undesirable. The place that you want to be is the middle place of self-respect. And I think that when you're respectful of yourself, you have confidence because you're being good to yourself, and you have humility because you're conscious of other people and their needs as well. So this is how respect works in relation to yourself. I think the highest aspiration of leadership, the leaders that we most admire, are this wonderful blend of confidence on the one hand, with resolve and backbone, and humility on the other hand. They know where they came from, they have not forgotten their roots, and they don't see themselves as better than you simply because they're in a position to be able to influence you through their leadership. So self-respect is a nice blend of confidence and humility, and this is the aspiration that we should be going for as a leader. It is what followers will follow and look for in a leader. Of course, respect doesn't happen in a vacuum. It also happens in relation to not just yourself, but in relationship to others. So I look at this interplay from four different dimensions. The first is, if I respect me, but I don't respect you, if it's got to be my way or the highway, if it's about me controlling the situation to get what I need, if it's about me using you as a resource only to the extent that you serve my goals and then I dismiss you, I call those pighead leaders. And we're going to get into this a little bit further as we get into the webinar. And it's a result of arrogance. It's also a result of disrespect. They respect themselves, but they disrespect others. You might know, in your mind's eye, you might be able to conjure up a pig-headed leader that you've worked with in the past. It's usually the function of arrogance. On the other hand, you might have a leader that respects the other, but doesn't respect themselves. They're a weak leader. They constantly put others' needs above their own. They defer to the decisions of others. They'll change their decision just to accommodate those around them. And they have no backbone and no resolve. Ultimately, they're irrelevant because results do matter to leadership. You got to get results. That's the bottom line of leadership, is to improve other people's performance, improve the performance of the organization. That means getting results. But weak leaders don't get results because they don't apply the best of themselves. They withhold their strengths so that they are constantly putting others above themselves. And I call that a weak leader. I think that the sweet spot is when I respect me and I respect you. I'm self-respectful and I'm respectful of the other. I can meet you eyeball to eyeball, and I can also get my needs met and get your needs met as well. I search to do just that. So there's this idea of a leader not being on a pedestal. It's a leader who recognizes that they have influence, that they have a certain responsibility, and the main responsibility is to help you be successful. This is what good leaders are. Now, on the other hand, the worst quadrant you can be, in my estimation, is if you don't respect yourself and you don't respect others. And let's just say I call that a sorry blank leader. That's a leader that I don't know that I could have any influence over in a coaching practice. And I really can't impact that leader. I feel sorry for that leader. So let's talk a little bit about those two leaders on the disrespectful dimension of respect. On the one hand, you've got pigheads. Pigheads disrespect others. Those are the ones that veer towards conceit and arrogance. They're overconfident. On the other hand, you have weaklings, and they disrespect themselves. They have no confidence. So these are the two leaders that you don't want to be, a pighead or a weakling. Let's do this. Let me ask you a little question, and I'll let you chat in your responses to this question. And by the way, this question that I'm going to put up in front of you, it comes from a book by Jim Kouzes and Barry Posner, two friends of mine. Many of you know them. They're preeminent leadership researchers, and they wrote a book recently called Learning Leadership, and it's really good. And in that book, they said that they asked this question. So I'm going to ask this question of you. On a scale ranging from 1 to 100, what percent of your talents did the best leader you ever worked for use? So I'll let you chat in your responses, and then I'll ask Becky to chime in with some of the responses that you're hearing as they come in. So on a scale ranging from 1 to 100, what percentage of your talents did the best leader you ever worked for use? Go ahead and chat in your responses.
Wow, I'm seeing a big range here, Bill. I see 35, 85, 100, 60, 35, 95, 90, 85, 50, 80, 20. Like there is a, like these percentages are all over the map, Bill.
Wow,
Somebody said 110%. I see a sad face and a 30%.
interesting. So I'm going to come back to that question in a minute. So if you'll pause your answers, because I'm going to ask a related question here in a moment, and then I want you to put in a new percentage. So hang with me. On a scale ranging from 1 to 100, what percent of your talents did the worst leader you ever worked for use? Let's go ahead and see what new responses you get this time chiming in.
Yeah, I've got 25, 10, 0, 13, 60, 1, 5, 40, 10. But here's what I find interesting, Bill. People are putting these responses in much more quickly than they put the previous responses in. I'm
Yeah,
interested in the psychology behind that. I can barely keep up with the stream. Stephen says that 0 because they did not consider my talents in their leadership process. I've got quite a few zeros here.
Yeah, interesting, right? And it may be, Becky, that they're able to put in the ones for the negative leader, if you will, more quickly, because I think that those come to leader. Those leaders often come to mind. We're able to think of sort of the bad leader, if you will. What's interesting is that Jim Kouzes and Barry Posner actually have summed an answer to this question, and what they have found that the bad leader generally, the average that the bad leader comes up with is generally 31% or less, meaning that that's about as much of the talents that they use of the typical person. Now, I recognize there's a range. I was actually in a session about 2 weeks ago where I asked this question, and the person there said that that leader got like 90% out of them because they were always having to apply their talents to prove that bad leader wrong. So, it's an interesting take. On the other hand, the good leader, the leader that we admire, the one who pays attention to us, if you will, generally the average is 95%. Can you imagine? So those leaders most admire that we have gotten a lot out of generally gets a lot more out of us. They get 95% of our talent usage on average. So to me, this becomes somewhat of the business case. It's like, which leader are you being? Are you the leader that's so preoccupied with yourself and getting your way and veering towards arrogance and respecting you and not respecting others, that this is the outcome you're getting, 31% of the talent of the people around you, particularly when they're the ones that determine whether you'll be successful or not, the followers. In fact, I would say that followers need leaders less than leaders need followers. A leader's success is contingent upon the performance of followers. And here, the good leader, the one that we most admire, and the one that I hope that you're being for others, gets a lot more out of people. And what's interesting, Becky, and you even pointed it out, that there was somebody on here that said, the leader got 110% out of me, which of course, is impossible, but we feel like that. Many people will say they got 125% out of me, that good leader. So it goes back to, again, which leader are you feeding? Which wolf are you feeding? The good leader that gets the good results, or the bad leader that gets the bad results? Now, I think that as you start to mature in your leadership, there's going to become a point in time that if you carry disrespectful behavior, whether disrespectful of yourself, and we call that weak leadership, or disrespect of others, which we call pig-headed leadership, that you are in for what I would call a leadership kick in the ass. Now, let me first say that I know that this word is troubling to a very, very, very small percentage of people on the phone, that this three-letter swear word. And when me and the publisher were thinking about the title, we actually had a different title for the book, but when we zeroed in on this, we just felt that this title, A Leadership Kick in the Ass, spoke to the truth of the situation. Now, what this is it tends to be a transformative, humiliating event brought on by the leader themselves, either through their disrespect of themselves, by not having a voice in the process, by constantly capitulating to others, by being weak and irrelevant and not getting results, or by being disrespectful to others, where they're abusive, controlling, arrogant, conceited. At some point, either condition will get a reverberation, a consequence drawn by their own behavior that we call a leadership kick in the ass. The good news is that this can be a transformative event. And in fact, I'll go so far as saying that you learn your best leadership lessons not from a cool, nifty new leadership book, although I encourage you to consider that, and not from a really cool workshop, but you learn the most enduring leadership lessons from these transformational moments, mostly brought on by embarrassment, that I call transformative humiliation. What that means is transformative humiliation is a positive behavioral change resulting from the psychological pain of embarrassment. Something you did wrong that now has a consequence, you get stung and you say, I don't want that to happen again. You know, the interesting thing is that we learn how to ride a bicycle after we fall down by trying to ride a bicycle, because it's only after we fall down and scrape our knees that we get back on the bike, and we do it differently by pedaling faster and harder. And that's kind of how it is with leadership. I'll give you a quick story from my own life. I was a member of the U.S. high diving team. I used to travel around with a troop of athletes all around the world, diving from 100-foot towers into small pools for a living. And at a young age, I was made the captain of the team. I was 24 years old. I didn't know what I was doing. I had no leadership references other than the two bosses before me and my father. And so what I did was, like we all do, we're imprinted by the leadership role models of those before us. I started to adopt the leadership style of my predecessors. Ultimately, I was not me being me. I was my dad coming out of me. I was being heavy-handed, ill-tempered, over-controlling, just like my dad was. And I got feedback from one of the divers one day, stayed behind. After one of their performances, I really lit into them. I told them that that performance was bunk, that I was embarrassed, that they were an embarrassment, and that if they didn't change, that their heads were going to roll, or somebody's head would roll, and that if they want me to be less upset, they need to do a better job. They need to do a better job to perform well if they want me to be less upset. This is the kind of leader I was at 24 years old. And then one of the divers stayed behind after I had lit into the team, and he said, Treasure, I got to tell you something. If you're going to treat me like that, or these folks like that, I don't need the job that bad to be treated that poorly by you. I'll walk. And I thought, who are you to talk to me like that, dude? I'm your boss, not the other way around. But I got thinking about it that night, and I knew he was right. I was embarrassed because what he said was, Treasurer, you suck at leading. And it stung, but I knew he was right. So I started reading books on leadership. I started getting interested in the topic. I read about this term, organizational development. I decided to go through graduate school. I did my thesis on leadership. I got better at being a leader. His tough feedback, which was a psychological, embarrassing kick in the ass for me, it instigated positive leadership change. It caused me to rethink who I was going to be as a leader. It humbled me. And that's why these why these embarrassing leadership events are so critical, so important, is because ultimately it's a humbling event. It causes you to get a authentic leadership style. You start to consider, who do I want to be in this world as a leader? So that's what I want to talk about now, because it can bring about these leadership kicks in the tail. When you get kicked in the psychological keister, now you get to think about, who is the leader I really want to be? And it results in a holy shift where it's now you start thinking about not me and who I am as a leader and aren't I great, but I start to recognize, wait a minute, leadership's not about me, it's about them. I got to do right by them. I have to treat the other better. I have to make them the focus of my leadership. I have to increase their capacity. I have to develop them. I have to spend time with them. This is the holy shift from being self-focused to being other-focused. And here's what I think happens when you, but again, it's brought on by this embarrassing event. You might think of your own life. Was there a point in time where you got some tough feedback? Was there a point in time where maybe you got fired? Was there a point in time where you had a big critical mistake and you were really embarrassed? Aren't those where you really learn a lot about leadership, because they bring about behavioral change in you? I'm a better person, not just a better leader, because of that feedback that one diver gave me. It results in a holy shift. And here's what happens after you make the holy shift as a leader. When you've made this focus, your shift goes from selfishness to selflessness. You've made this holy shift as a leader, and it's critical that you do. That leader who's made the holy shift, first of all, embodies a set of values. She knows what she stands for. She knows what she's really, genuinely, at a deep level, all about. She's focused on others. She's conscious of the gifts that she brings, the talents that she has, and that where the overuse of those talents start to cast a shadow. So she's aware of her sunshine, her gifts, and the overuse of her sunshine, which is her shadows. She's keenly observant and listens deeply to others, because that's how she can best show that she values them. She shares lessons from her own lives, her failures and her weaknesses, her blemishes. She realizes that people need to know those things. Yes, it's vulnerable when you share them, but it's how people learn that they can be vulnerable as leaders too. And she knows that she gets successful to the extent that she helps other people be successful. She is confident on the one hand and humble. Her confidence is anchored to humility. A leader who's made the holy shift, the bottom line is they are non-toxic. They're not toxic individuals like pigheads and weaklings are through disrespect. A person who's made the holy shift from selfishness to selflessness is a healthy leader. All right, so let's talk about that leader. When you have a leader who is able to be confident on the one hand and humble on the other, because they've been humbled in the past, then there's three expressions of what this looks like. The first one is a leader who is confidently humble is able to be what I would call a genuine faker. It's very common for a lot of leaders as they progress in their seasoning to constantly struggle with this feeling that today is the day I'm going to be found out. The truth is, there's a lot written about authenticity, and I'm all about it. Look, I feel like I talk in a pretty authentic way. Even the title of the book, I hope, comes off as authentic, right? But there's times in your leadership where you also are in the performance role as a leader. I'll share with you a quick story. A really good friend of mine and a very seasoned professional with one of my clients. He's a director of training and development. He has been at Aldridge Electric Company up in Chicago. And he was in his young 30s, and they were bidding on a piece of work that was bigger than they had ever had any before. And he put together the bid. He was sort of early on in his leadership. He was only leading 5 people at that time. And then they won the bid. And because he was so involved in the bid, and it was the biggest project they ever had, and he knew it inside out. They asked him to take the leadership role, except it meant that he was now going to go from leading 5 people to leading 80 people, 16 times more people than he had ever led before. It was a big gulp moment. So he couldn't let his people that were reporting to him know that he was freaking out on the inside. He had to carry himself with composure. So he still had to perform in the role of leadership to demonstrate confidence, but he also had to know that he didn't know everything. He had to have the humility to know that he had to portray confidence, but he had to act with humility as he learned from the people around him. So when you're confident and humble at the same time, sometimes it's okay to be a genuine faker as you're learning. You're acting as if you have the skills as you're learning your way into the skills. Now I want to talk about the second thing. When you have confidence and humility, you can communicate in a way that is confident and humble. It can be assertive and respectful at the same time. This would be what I would call a velvet hammer. You have to be able to have diplomacy in your communication, and you still have to make a point in an assertive way that gets through to people. I'm not into this term at all, brutal honesty. Some leaders are like, I'm brutally honest. If they can't handle it, that's up to them. I'm brutally honest. They have to be the ones who take it or not. If you're somebody who prides yourself on being brutally honest, you ought to be embarrassed, because leadership communication should not take brutality. It takes diplomacy and assertiveness, not aggressiveness, by the way. So being a velvet hammer, you're capable of doing that when you're confident. That gives you the assertiveness, and humble. That gives you the diplomacy. So confidence and humility allows you to be a velvet hammer in your communication. And then confidence and humility joined together allows you also to be very loyal to the company. That's your humility, where you realize there's plenty of people around here who know more than I do. And it allows you to be rebellious with your confidence. And it's really important that leaders are able to act as agents of the larger system, but with independence. You've got to be able to be independent as a leader, so that sometimes when the organization or the department is going in the wrong direction, you got to be strong enough with backbone to point that out and to say you're not going there. So you've got to be able to be a loyal rebel when you're a leader. A story that comes to mind for this is one of my first bosses, a really great guy, a guy that I still admire, still a guy who's mentored to me today. His name is Heinz Brannon. Heinz Brannon was a partner at Accenture when I was there, and he had about 35 other partners reporting to him. Now, he had become the managing director, the managing partner of the Charlotte office after the CEO had left that office and gone on to a different office. Heinz came in after him. And one of his first acts under the CEO predecessor, who at the time was the managing director of the Charlotte office, every Saturday, all of the partners had to come in for a half day. This means they had been at work at the client all week from Monday to Friday, flying home on Friday night, and then Saturday had to be in on a Saturday meeting, because the predecessor to Heinz Brannon believed that this was the only time that we could coordinate the team and get together and stay aligned. And it really upset the partners. They would grumble about it, but nobody had the courage to say it to their leader. By the way, I find even now with my work with senior leaders, some of them talk about the need to have a Saturday meeting as if it's like some thing that's going to make them get more money in their company if we just all meet on Saturdays. So what Heinz Brannon did in his first official act in the Charlotte office as managing partner, he got everybody together and he said, okay, partners, let me let you know, here's my first official act, and I'm going to make it known here on Saturday morning, since we've all grouped. There will never be another Saturday morning meeting under my leadership. Literally, to a person, all of the partners stood up and clapped. Now, Heinz was capable of doing that because he is a very independent and confident person. He's also humble. He recognized that this informal cultural practice was actually bad for the company and bad for the health of the partners. So he was actually being loyal to them and to the company in this rebellious act. As a leader, when you have confidence and humility together, you're more capable of being a loyal rebel. So I'm going to share with you a couple of tips on how you can be a confidently humble leader. And then I'm going to open it up to whatever questions you have, and I'd love to hear them. Keep in mind, by the way, you're the first people that are being introduced to the concepts from my new book. So you're special to me, and I look forward to getting your reactions and your questions here in a minute. Tip number one, identify your future self. Think about who that you are today as a leader. But what I really want you to think about is who is the leader that you need to be to best serve people and the organization? What is the gap between the leader that you are today and the leader that you need to be? Think about 3 years from now, an ideal day in the life of you where you're having a true and positive impact on people and the organization. What does that leader look like? And then what are the actions you need to take today, tomorrow, next month to move you more closely to that leader you're trying to become? So identify with specificity the leader you want to be. Second, make sure that you've got at least one person around you that is a chief ego deflator. Ego is what gets in the way of leadership. When your ego is too large, you're likely to be a pighead. When it's too small, you're likely to be a weakling. So getting a right-sized ego is important, and having feedback of people around you is important. I'll share with you a story from my own life. So when my book, Leaders Open Doors, came out, I was doing a considerable amount of speaking. And one day I was looking in T&D magazine, that's published by ATD. And on page 8, there was a picture of me. And it said, Bill Treasurer is going to be speaking at our conference. And then I looked and went through the rest of the magazine. And there on page 23, Bill Treasurer was again, it was my picture because I was going to be speaking in 2 conferences. So now you can imagine the size of my big head. Oh, look at me. I'm going to be speaking at 2 conferences. So I go upstairs and I bring the magazine to show my wife. And I look, honey, page 8. Look at page 23. What do you think about that? With my big head. And my wife looked at me in that way that only a spouse that is so universally spousal would disgust. And she looked at me and went, go clip your nose hairs. She's literally, those were the 5 words out of her mouth. Go clip your nose hairs. So you know what I did? I went and clipped my nose hairs. She helps me stop getting over myself. She helps me when my ego is too big. She is my chief ego deflator. When I come home from a big conference where I've spoken to 500 people, she's waiting at the door with the garbage. Go on, take out the garbage. She helps me that way. On the other hand, nobody is more there for me when my ego is feeling too low, when I'm beating myself up, when I'm concerned that I didn't have the impact that I wanted to have, when I don't feel like I'm resonating. She's the one that helps build me up. We need a chief ego deflator, and we also need a chief ego inflator. And oftentimes they can be in the form of the same person. But have one. Have one. Have the person that can get through to you, who's allowed to tell you that you've got broccoli in your teeth after eating lunch. You need those points of feedback. And then thirdly, you know, a lot of leaders will ask me, especially emerging and young leaders early on. I can think of one right now who's getting ready to take the helm of the company, and it's a big company, about a $500 million company. He's like, Bill, I'm getting a lot of advice from a lot of people about how to be a good leader, and I don't even know where to start. How do I become a good leader? I tell him, as I'll tell you, you want to be a good leader? Start by being a good person. Start with your own integrity. Here's some things to do in that regard. First of all, conduct a kick review. Think back over the course of your career and light up the light on some of those more embarrassing moments, those humiliating moments where you got feedback that hurt, whether in terms of the lack of results or a result you didn't want, or maybe literal feedback from somebody above you or beneath you. Conduct a quick review and think about what did you learn from all of those and how did they humble you or did you allow them to? Invite feedback from others, not just the chief ego deflator, but also invite feedback from the people that you're leading. What do they need from you? What are moments where they have seen you lead that they think was useful? What are other moments where you missed an opportunity to lead? What do they see as the gifts and talents you bring with your leadership? And what do they have by way of improvement suggestions? If your company can't afford a 360-degree feedback, just send them a simple email with those questions, making sure that you're in the mind to hear that feedback and making it a commitment and promise that you will not hurt them in any way for telling you the truth. Thirdly, lead from the high road unconditionally. A lot of leaders are like, yeah, I am going to be a good leader, but not this month because I've got too much going. You don't understand the quarterly pressure right now. I just don't have time to treat people well. That's not being good. You got to be unconditionally good. You've got to be unconditionally taking the high road, most especially when others are taking the low road. Two sillies do not make a sense. If somebody's being disrespectful to you, it does not become permission for you to become disrespectful to them. Bring good to the bad. When you're facing a bad situation, ask yourself, what good can I do here? What is the influence that I could bring that might bring about some good? Be good, especially to others in your treatment of them. Listen to them. Invite their input. Ask them what they think. Let them shape ideas. Give them opportunities to lead. Throw sunshine their way. Be good to them. And then finally, if you want to be a good leader, you got to be good to yourself. You got to take care of yourself. You got to be physically fit. You got to be mentally fit. You've got to be spiritually fit. You have to set aside occasional time for just you. Sometimes inaccessibility is important to a leader. Yeah, I talk about leaders opening doors. Sometimes you got to close the door so that you have protected time where you can think and get some sanity so that you can best serve others. So be good to yourself. It all comes back to which leader are you feeding? Are you feeding the self-respectful, the one who's respectful of others, the confident and humble leader? Or are you feeding the leader that's kind of like most people on a bad day, feeding anger, feeding your frustration, having a need to be in control of others? Which leader will you feed? And with that, I'm going to open it up to some questions, and I can't wait to hear them. So, Becky, if
Hi,
you'll open the lines.
I am here. Let me put my camera on. And Bill, I have to tell you, the feedback that we are getting from our audience today is absolutely amazing. So I don't know, like, did you just email all your best friends and invite them? Because I'm hearing all these like professions of love for you and all that stuff.
Thanks,
Yeah, this is fantastic. So I'm going to be selfish for a minute. I know that you just told us we shouldn't, but you had that comment about the ego deflator. What about those of us who would be on the weak side? What do we still need an ego deflator, and if so, why?
No, I think in those, look, I think that both of us, all of us, every human being has the potential to have an inflated ego in some instances and not enough ego in other instances. My recommendation is also to have a chief ego inflator. Now, I'm lucky. My wife serves both of those. But I think of, for example, in my life, um, I've got a particular friend. He's actually the friend who put together these slides, who's really good to be at being there for me and reminding me of the full potency of my gifts and talents. And he can inflate my ego when I'm, in private moments with him. I'll share with him sort of my insecurities, and he's good about building me up. So I think that I'll tell you, the person who used to do that for me a lot, Becky, was my grandmother. Nobody did that, but she is the one who would. I would not have any confidence, I wonder, if it wasn't for her. She was really fantastic at that. She helped give me some backbone. So I think we need both, a chief ego inflator and a chief ego deflator.
Thanks for that clarification. So this question comes from Mary Lee, and she's wondering, Bill, have you found that for some people, one of these embarrassing events doesn't bring about behavior change, but the person persists even more with the bad leadership style?
Yes, I do. In fact, there's a whole chapter in the book. Thank you for your question, Mary Lee. It's a good question. There's a whole chapter in the book called "The Anatomy of a Butt Kick," and it breaks down how butt kicks. First, oftentimes it starts from a place of oblivion. We don't even know ourselves, right? We don't know we're being obnoxious towards others, or we don't know that we're being weak. And then we have the kick moment, and then we have two choices there. And the first choice often happens is we entrench and defend. We defend why everyone else was wrong. It was the circumstance. It was the situation. You don't understand. And we come up with a defense and we entrench ourselves. And people like that, unfortunately, only become more oblivious to themselves. So I described that in The Anatomy of a Butt Kick. Then the opposite reaction is we become open to learning. We use this and a lot of times it's both. First, we might entrench and defend, like I did when that person gave me feedback that I was a sucky leader. At first, I was like, dude, I'm your boss, right? And I came on strong. But once it settled in, I sort of marinated with what he said. I became much more open to what he had said, and it stung. Gandhi said, the truth only hurts if it should. And if it stings, it's probably trying to tell you something, and you ought to follow that feeling because it will allow you to learn on the backside. The long arc of the story is a transformation for you. You become a better, stronger, more confident leader if you allow yourself to learn. But sadly, as Mary Lee is sort of hinting at here, some people entrench and defend and only become more pig-headed or more of a weakling.
Got it. Well, Crystal has a question for you, Bill. She's wondering what advice you'd have for someone. Maybe the leaders in the company think the person is ready for leadership, but the person themselves doesn't really feel ready to lead.
Yeah, so I appreciate the comment and the sentiment. And I work with a lot of emerging leaders. And I'll tell you what's fun is for senior leaders to sit back and recognizing the potential in the person before they recognize it themselves. It's kind of a beautiful thing when that happens. And the challenge becomes for the more senior leader to help that leader become aware of the nascent leader that's inside of them. What I would say is invite them into that process in smaller ways before bigger ways. Like I wouldn't necessarily dump that first time leader with 80 people all of a sudden to lead. I think that would be overwhelming. But allow them to do small leadership acts first, like maybe let them facilitate your meeting when you're on vacation and say, look, you're responsible now for this meeting because I don't want to cancel the status meeting. I want you to facilitate it. That means let's work through the agenda together, but you have to marshal that conversation. So allow that person, that nascent leader, give them small leadership opportunities and incrementally help them get where they build confidence so that they're more capable of leading bigger things as time goes on. You have to believe in them before they believe in themselves, but then you have to transfer that belief that you have in them to them.
That's very helpful. So here's another question. How do you get a pig head to be willing to listen to this advice? And that question comes from Mark.
Mark, therein lies the challenge, right? It's really challenging. Here's what my own experience has been that it will happen to themselves as a result of their own oblivious behavior. I was once part of a leadership panel with a CEO of a mattress company, and somebody had whispered to me, watch out for so-and-so because their ego walks in the room 30 minutes before they do. Sure enough, this guy came into the room, sort of owned the room, started bragging about how he controls his board of directors, how he hires some of his own children because he knows they've got the right DNA. And then after the panel, he gave everybody a copy of his favorite book of quotations. And he was the only person quoted in the book. They were his quotes. So this was like a pig head. Well, the guy got fired from his company, right? The challenge is, does that person from that stinging event, that can become the opening, right? That can become the source of potential humility where they realize that their own arrogance is getting in their own way. Or it can become entrench and defend. And sadly, in his case, it did. So it's not an easy thing to get through to a pig head. In fact, I think it's probably easier to get through to a weakling leader because I think most of us start out that way than it is to get through to a pig head. I would say that, one thing, the transformational kick itself is the best opportunity. And then I would say if your organization has a 360-degree feedback Sometimes that can be, I know it's controversial and some people aren't into it. I am into it. I've seen it have a great impact on some leaders. And in fact, I can think of a specific pighead that I worked with that got rough feedback, that had to do extra coaching with me because of the feedback that he had gotten. But the boomerang effect was 5 years later, I was now teaching a leadership course that was an 18-month course that had two of his direct reports in it. 5 years after that pighead got their feedback, and they were telling me what a good mentor, what a good leader this was, and I knew the starting point. I knew the pighead that he was, and the reverence that they now held this person in, so I could see the transformation get through, and it was all the result of a 360. But it's a challenging project and problem, Mark.
Well, we have a question from another Mark. Actually, this is a different Mark, and I like this question a lot. He said, in an organization of self-proclaimed team of type A personalities, I've been giving the feedback that I need to be more of an a-hole. Any advice? So this person maybe is on the weak leader side, not on the pighead side.
Yeah, so he's been given the advice that he needs to be more of an a-hole. Is that right?
Indeed.
Yeah. So yeah, that's funny. It's challenging. What I find is that people that may be more other focused or more relational in nature sometimes struggle themselves with feeling that they need to be tougher, right? Like I had a guy that was leading 75 people really well, and everybody enjoyed this person's leadership. But he came to me for coaching because he felt like he needed to be tougher. In your case, Mark, your organization is telling you you need to be more of an a-hole. It's interesting because I think that there are some people who, I go back to that original source. The people who are telling you that, intriguing to me to find out who were their leadership influences and why do they think that they need to lead that way? Because here's the reality. You took any single one of those a-hole leaders and asked them, do they know somebody who's a really effective leader that they admire that doesn't have to be an a-hole to get people to perform well? To a person, they'd be able to identify somebody. Then the question becomes, if you can get performance out of people without having to resort to being an a-hole, why wouldn't you do that? It's more enjoyable for them and more enjoyable for you, and it takes less effort for you. So I reject the notion that you have to be an a-hole. That doesn't mean that you can't deliver tough feedback. Remember, I said sometimes you got to be a velvet hammer. Sometimes you have to be assertive in a way that protects the dignity of the person in front of you. But you never have to be demeaning, and you never have to pull rank to get things done. If you need to do that, I think that then it becomes a choice for you. If you're in a organization of dark wolves, you have to decide, can you be successful there? And you might be able to be. Because you might be differentiated from others. Or do you need to go a place where there's more lighter wolves?
That's really helpful, Bill. So I have some good news for you, Bill, and some bad news. The good news is we have so many questions and so many comments that we're not going to be able to address them. The bad news, Bill, is that my advice is going to be for you that you blog on each one of these questions leading up to the launch of the book in 130 days. You have some great questions that you could address in your blog post. So that's the bad news.
That's good news. That's an ass kick for me.
All right. That's awesome. So if you wouldn't mind, I have a few things that I want to tell our audience about that might be on your next slide.
Great. There we go.
So all of you who have enjoyed this webinar, you might be thinking, how on earth am I going to wait 130 days to get my hands on this book and dig deeper to the content? I have a very, very special offer just for you. If you will go today or tomorrow or next week or the week after and pre-order Bill's book, A Leadership Kick in the Ass on Amazon, and send me the receipt of the pre-order, I have an extra special secret PDF advanced copy of the book that I can send to you so that you can read and get started on following the content and getting excited for the book launch. So that is the first very special offer I have for you. The second one is we would love to have you join Bill's launch team. If you don't know what a launch team is a group of people who join together with an author to build excitement for their book. And we'll have some asks for you along the way, including, wanting you to share with your social media connections about the book and your excitement for it and its content. And if you'd like to join the launch team, I will include a link to it in my follow-up email. I did see one person already in the comments offer to host a blog post on your behalf, Bill. I think that person is someone who's going to raise their hand for the launch team. So when you join the launch team, also we have a special private Facebook group where you'll get to interact with Bill and ask some of these questions that you have for him and kick his tail to write more blog posts on the questions that you asked on today's call that we didn't quite get to. It's a lot of fun. I'm part of it, of course. And so please, I encourage you, if you are interested in this topic or you enjoyed today's content, we want you to join the launch team. Again, if you pre-order the book and send me, Becky at Weaving Influence, your Amazon receipt, we will get that PDF out to you, and you'll have a chance to dig in and read the book 130 days before everyone else. One more thing, if you enjoyed this webinar and would like to hear from Bill again, there are 2 more ways that you can experience Bill's greatness. You can go to my website, weavinginfluence.com, and go to our events tab and go to all of the webinar replays and look for Bill. There are at least 5 events in which he's participated in the past, and you can watch them and continue to learn from Bill. The next is that on the day of Bill's launch, 130 days from now, we will host another webinar with special guest Marshall Goldsmith. So we hope that you'll sign up for that one as well. Bill, this is a complete joy. So thanks for sharing with us today, and thanks to all of you who invested your time.